Recording in progress. Another episode of the Square and Compass podcast. I never do this, so I'll mention this now. Hit the like and subscribe button, all that good jazz that you're supposed to say. I never say that. We are back virtually, anyways, in Nevada, a place I was just at in person not that long ago, with Worshipful Brother Elliot Malin. He's the IPM Immediate Past Master of Reno Lodge No. 30, Reno, Nevada. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And again, I apologize. The dogs are outside. If I get up for a second and just let them in.
That's no problem. I'll find a way to fill up the time. I got your info from your uncle, Brother Carp. He's from Clarence Daylight Lodge. I'll put his link up to his interview on this video. But he sent me your information for two reasons. The first, I just had come from Nevada and did an interview with brethren in Elko Lodge, and that made him think of you, obviously being from Nevada or a past master in Nevada. And also, he specifically mentioned your age, right? You became a worshipful master of your lodge when you were, still in your 20s. And now you're IPM, what was your Masonic journey like to get to the point of being a worshipful master, relatively young?
Yeah, it's a great question. So to take a step back a little bit, actually, Masonry runs in my family. My uncle is my mom's brother. His father, my grandfather, was a Mason. His uncle is a Mason. And then on my father's side, my dad is a Mason. In fact, they were part of the same lodge, home lodge in, I want to say Van Nuys for a while, together with my grandfather almost 30 years ago. And then my father's father was a Mason. And so Masonry was something that was always in my family. And I was never Demolay or anything like that, but I always knew that I would be a Mason. That was important to me. That was important to my family. It's part of our family tradition and our family history. And so after I graduated college, I got interested, and at that point, joining the lodge, one of the lodges here. And so the lodge I'm a member of, Reno 13, is in downtown Reno. We share a building. We own the building. We share ownership with the Grand Lodge of Nevada. So the Grand Lodge is based in our building. We also share ownership with the Scottish Rite Valley of Reno, as well as the York Rite. And so it's a pretty big building, and I think this is the third building in downtown that we've had. In fact, recently, the oldest building in town was the Masonic building, Reno 13's original building, and unfortunately, that actually had to come down because it wasn't structurally safe. And there was a big ceremony that they brought out the lodge to do. The city came out, which was pretty incredible, actually, because they found a lot of artifacts and history underneath it when they broke into the cornerstone. And so after college, this is 2014, 2015, I started attending dinners. I was initiated in June 2015. It was June 9th, 2015. And so it's only 2022. It's 7 years ago, right? When I joined the lodge, I immediately got engaged, got active. I was raised pretty quickly. I was raised that year. We went dark for the summer, was passed, I want to say August, and then raised in, I want to say it was November because it was very cold. So if I'm not mistaken, actually, it's about to be my 7-year anniversary of being raised. I got involved. I got into the line immediately. And it was a little rare because we're known as a lodge of leadership in Nevada. A lot of grandmasters, the past grandmaster, actually now 2 past grandmasters ago, because we just installed a new grandmaster, I think yesterday, is a member of my lodge. We have the senior grand warden is a member of our lodge as well. And so we're known as a lodge of leadership. And unfortunately, a few brothers had to drop out of the line because of work and family commitments. And so I moved up pretty quickly. And and got very involved, got involved in the Scottish Rite, got into leadership in the Scottish Rite as well. And then started bringing other new brothers in to have dinner and just meeting other Masons, and stayed very active. And then brothers elected me to be master. I will say that it was a very hard time to be master. I was senior warden in 2020. And we know what happened in 2020 with COVID shutting down everything, and became master March 2021 instead of December 2020 because we were closed. We were ordered to be closed by the governor because of COVID. And so I had a unusual master's tenure where my goal was just to bring people back home to the lodge and get brothers active again. And so we're about to go through our elections, and my successor is about to leave the East. But I'm really proud of the work that we both did to make sure that the lodge has remained active and remained open and bringing in more brothers.
How important was, you mentioned it twice, and it's something that our Grand Lodge here in Ontario has really been trying to stress. I think it's being stressed everywhere. How important were those initial dinners and kind of they're Masonic events, but having a chance to meet with brothers and visit the lodge in those informal or semi-formal type of events before you actually either put in your application or between the time that you put in your application to your initiation. How important was it to have the chance to attend those dinners and meet with lodge members in that setting?
I will answer that question. I'm gonna let one of the dogs in really fast.
Go nuts, go nuts.
He's crying. Sorry, thank you.
No worries. We love dogs here at Square and Compass. I mean, I have a cat because dogs are a lot more work than a cat, but nonetheless.
I appreciate that. I'm actually watching my parents' dogs right now because they're on a cruise in the Caribbean. So I have 4 crazy mutts running around the house that we love dearly. But to answer your question, we have a rule. I don't know if that rule applies to every lodge and every jurisdiction. Ours is a little unique. We don't give out petitions on the first dinner. You have to come to 3 events. That doesn't have to be a dinner. It could be a softball game. It could be some fellowship event we're having outside of the lodge. It could be a baseball game that we're all going to. But the purpose of that is strictly so you can meet us and we can meet you. We want to make sure that you're comfortable around us and we're comfortable around you. And it's to make sure you understand what you're getting into. It allows you the opportunity as a prospective Mason to ask these questions, try to understand what it is that we're about. Obviously, we're not going to tell ritual and secrets, but we want prospective brothers to understand the commitment that we all have to the craft, to the lessons of the craft and the degrees, and to each other, and how important that is, and to make sure that they have that commitment themselves. The last thing we want to do is bring people in, initiate people that won't advance. We're not here to grow our roles. We're here to make good men better.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's a really, really good point, right? I mean, a name on a name on a piece of paper in a file somewhere, or even a bank account with the dues coming in, it's not going to replace what a brother's presence brings to a lodge, right? What his attendance, what his participation will mean for that lodge. And I think there is a tendency, and I've talked about this a lot, I've gotten in trouble for talking about this in the past, there is a tendency for lodges to have this attitude of, the name on the piece of paper is the most important thing, or the dues coming in is the most important thing. And I just don't see how any organization can grow if that's the attitude that they take.
Well, that's not really what we're about, right? We're about making good men better. It's about the fellowship. It's about doing what's right. When I was ending my term as master, an incoming officer started an event. I didn't have necessarily anything to do with it. I gave the okay, but the entire purpose of the event was to bring Christmas presents to kids in the hospital on Christmas and set that up for them so that way that they could have the holidays and cheer while they were hospitalized, right? And those are the kind of things that we push, that we want to do. There's always more to the lodge than being in the lodge, right? If we're only in the building and within our four walls, we're failing as Masons. Ritual is important, but the ritual teaches us lessons that we're supposed to carry outside. And we strive to do that as brothers, as a lodge.
Yeah, and that goes to the danger, I think, of I call it. This isn't just in Masonry, but the danger of, I call it one thinging something to one thing something, which is where people will say, Freemasonry is about X, and they'll have a specific. Freemasonry is about the ritual. Freemasonry is about whatever it might be. My view's always been, it's about everything, and it's about knowing where to apply things. People will ask me why I'm such a big proponent of virtual meetings, virtual things, right? And my answer is always, well, it's like saying, if there's a nail in front of me, I'm a big proponent of a hammer, but if there's a screw, I'm not, right? Everything has a place, and sometimes the most important thing is to be in lodge. Sometimes the most important thing is the ritual. Sometimes the most important thing is a charitable endeavor, like Christmas presents for Children's Hospital. Sometimes it's about being online. There's always something that can be done to improve the craft. It's just about figuring out what that is in the moment and then implementing it, and not getting stuck on one particular thing. Because when you do that, like it's the old expression, right? If all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. You need multiple tools, and you need to take advantage of each of them appropriately.
Yeah, and I think that's something that during my time as master actually was something I stressed, was remembering the lessons from the respective degrees, from the working tools from the respective degrees, and how you apply that to your life, not just as a Mason, but as an upright man and Mason. Right. And I apologize. Dogs are barking. So let me go get them inside now.
No worries. Go grab them. We'll wait here for one more. We'll wait here for another second. I'll give the shout out again. Why not? Like the podcast, comment on the podcast. Think I'm right, think I'm wrong, why you think I'm right, why you think I'm wrong. Go nuts. Any comments you have, the more the better.
Sorry about that. Again, watching my parents' two dogs plus my two dogs. So I apologize for any background noise that they bring.
The working tools, how it applies to somebody's life. During the pandemic, as you said, very interesting time to be Worshipful Master. What type of things, like what type of activities did you do? Did you try to do? How did you and your officers try to kind of maintain the lodge during, it was a very challenging time, I think, for Freemasonry throughout the world?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Something that was important to me was we had weekly lunches just outside. We weren't allowed to do things. So we would try to do anything we could to get people together. And that was important to us. It was trying to keep people active, especially brothers that were, or not even brothers yet. They weren't yet brothers. And they were prospective members, and we didn't want to lose their interest. And so we wanted to make sure that we kept them coming out. We kept having conversations with them, even if they were virtual. We would have a virtual happy hour, right? Everybody would be in their own home. We'd be on Zoom, and we would be able to get together. And that was really important to me, because it was the one thing that we had so much momentum, and that momentum was stopped, just bluntly stopped. It was like a train running into a wall, and there was nothing we could do about that. And so we were doing everything we could to get people together. At first it was virtually, then things started to lighten up a little bit. So we would go get lunch together. We'd get soup because it was cold out, right? And so just doing things that we could together while not violating the orders was important to me, especially because I knew that other brothers were having a hard time with the isolation, and making sure we were also just checking up on one another.
I was surprised you mentioned it was cold. I was surprised how cold Nevada was. I always thought Nevada is a very hot place, but Elko
So
was
you're in
chilly.
Elko? Did you go to the
was.
Star?
The where?
The Star?
I don't think so. I went to, where'd I go? I went to Ruby Mountains, which
So the
was
Star
really
is
cool.
a Basque restaurant. If the brothers in Elko didn't take you to the Star, they failed you, in my opinion.
Oh, I'm going to talk to them about that because no, I don't think I went to Drees, I think it was called, like a breakfast spot, which is really good. I was a big fan of it. It's a cool little town. I liked it a lot. Very beautiful. I like that whole like east west coast has really cool scenery and the mountains and everything. It's a really cool. It was a really cool little town. Nevada's I took the train kind of out of Nevada to Chicago. It's beautiful. The whole thing is beautiful. That whole area has got some pretty impressive scenery, that's for sure. Back to Freemasonry though, not that the scenery isn't worth talking about. One thing, and this has been really interesting to me, during the pandemic, one question I would often ask my guests was whether or not they felt that Freemasonry within the virtual world was there to stay or was going to go away as restrictions lifted and in-person meetings resumed. And the answer I got primarily was always that it's here to stay in one form or another. There's always going to be a virtual component now moving into future. And I was and I still am a big proponent of Freemasonry in the virtual realm because there are a lot of advantages to it. What I found so interesting, and I don't know if you have a similar experience, in Ontario during the pandemic, we started with, and here's my cat, we started with what's called go-to meetings, like it pretty much a Zoom type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And we were given monthly meeting dates by Grand Lodge where you'd go onto Zoom or go into go-to meeting and you'd have your go-to meetings, right? And I became a big proponent of them because they provided a lot of advantages that in-person meetings don't. The most obvious one being the ability to travel, right? Like, especially you may have a member who travels, who's not able to visit Lodge in person because he's 8 hours away, he's another province over. The ability for him to come back to Lodge, at least in a virtual sense, the ability to bring in guests who, to do a presentation, a guest speaker, normally you may have to charge a lot of money for them because they have to cover their travel expenses, everything else. Also bringing in candidates, there's a lot of advantages to the virtual world that can augment in person, I've always thought. And just when you brought up the idea of momentum, it's funny, I kind of found the momentum died twice. When the initial lockdowns took place, at least in Canada, Masonic momentum died in terms of in-person meetings and all the work that was going on there. But then when in-person meetings came back, it's like the same thing. Then the momentum died the other end. And all of a sudden, Freemasonry in the virtual realm seemed to end as well because people had this attitude of, well, we're meeting in person again, so why worry about virtual? And it's just one of those things where I feel like we're missing a big opportunity to use a tool. The tool's now there. We've seen it can work. It's in the toolbox. Why not take advantage of it still? Just because you're meeting in person doesn't mean you can't set aside a time for a virtual meeting to bring in a guest speaker from Nevada, say, from wherever it is, or to welcome back some brothers who maybe moved out of town but are still keeping their membership up with the lodge. It just seems like, I don't know why Freemasonry sometimes feels like, or Freemasons can't, walk and chew gum at the same time. Just because we're back to in person doesn't mean the virtual has to die out, but it seems to be.
Right. And I mean, I think that Nevada's unique, right? You were recently here. Very interesting that you were in Elko. I love Elko. But a lot of our brothers strive for that in-person stuff. And so it's been interesting because we do have those brothers who have been hard to get to come back to lodge because they're still afraid, and that's fine. I can't tell them to not be afraid. That's not my place, right? What kind of brother would I be to try to force them back into the building? And so for me, it's important that we do whatever we can to keep them engaged. And if that means having those virtual events, then so be it.
Yeah, yeah, and I just think that goes to back to what I talked about before, and I guess I'm curious as to your, experiences with this. The or maybe you have the opposite experience of it. It sounds like you've done a great job, or your lodge has done a great job at trying to be holistic in your Masonic career and your lodge's Masonic journey, where yes, you're taking your ritual seriously, but you're also taking charitable endeavors seriously. You're taking everything seriously and not focusing on one thing to the detriment of other areas.
Yeah. So Nevada, our Grand Lodge gives out an award called the Silver State Award. Nevada's the Silver State, which I have a lot of complaints about because we produce more gold every year than California's ever could produce, and they're the Golden State. That's not the topic of this today, but you should know that. So the Silver State Award is what we give to lodges that are going above and beyond. And by above and beyond, I mean like doing everything that they're supposed to be doing in Masonry. It's not just about ritual. We want you to do really well with ritual. Good ritual is important for the lodge because it helps you with the lessons that the ritual teaches us. But there's more to Masonry than just the ritual, right? And so we want to make sure that we are well-rounded, that we are doing our charity. And it's not just that one event we do for Christmas, right? We do Bikes for Books, where we bring bikes and books to lower income communities for students. We give out scholarship to try to help students attend college. We do everything we can to be good community members. And it's not just about being active. It's also teaching other people in the community that Masonry is one here, come learn about us, but also we just want to do what's right. We want to help our community.
Now, where does that holistic approach start? Does it start with membership, especially, in the early phases of even the application process, going back to what you talked about, a applicant needing to attend 3 events before there's an application provided. Is that the time when you're discussing with that potential member, that potential applicant, the different things that the lodge does, that the lodge can do, and also trying to gather what that particular applicant's strengths may be, because maybe he's into the more esoteric side of it. Maybe he's into charitable endeavors. Maybe he's into, you can kind of get the sense of be a good ritualist. To what extent is it about finding those strengths that applicant, that member can bring to the lodge, and then utilizing it in like the best way possible?
That's a really good question, because that itself can cause friction if you think about it, right? Some things are going to be more important to other brothers than other things. Some brothers are there for the charity. Some are there for the ritual. Some are there for the lessons. And so trying to weave all of this together is very important. And so I think that it does start when you're starting to come into the lodge, when you're coming to events, when you're learning about Masonry, and when these prospective brothers, we give them a tour of our building. We explain what each room is. We have a Masonic library and museum. We bring them to it, right? And we're explaining these things, and we're learning more about them and what's their interest, and trying to put them into a committee once they're raised, or once they get active, even initiated. We don't want brothers to wait until they're raised to get active in something, right? And so once they get initiated, we're trying to keep them active, get them going to things, have a coach for them to go through the Masonic journey with them. and doing everything we can to propel their Masonic endeavors and career, we want to put them in the line. When brothers come in, we want to put them into leadership because it keeps it, one, it helps strengthen their Masonic knowledge, and two, it keeps them active and invested. Again, it's not just about having a long roster of names. It's about having brothers.
And how do you, or how does a lodge manage those tensions that can arise when different brothers have different areas of interest, different goals, and even as Worshipful Master, now an IPM, what is your role in trying to deal with those tensions that can arise?
I'm there as a resource to the master. At the end of the day, that's it. I'm not going to tell the master what to do. I'm not going to tell the brothers what to do unless it's to respect the master and the lodge, right? And that's, again, we're more of a lodge of leadership. So a lot of our past masters are even past Grand Lodge officers, past Grand Masters, current Grand Lodge officers. Our secretary right now is the Grand Organist. And as I mentioned, the Senior Grand Warden is a member of our lodge. A past Grand Master, bunch of past Grand Masters are members of our lodge. And so we all take the same approach, and that is to just whisper wise counsel to the master, because it is obviously their show. But on the other side of that, when I was master, it was trying to put people into places that made sense, that they were passionate about. Was that the charity committee? Was that the ritual committee? Was that the fellowship committee, and trying to help plan fellowship and doing events? Something that was very important to me was breaking outside of the walls and making sure that we as Masons were out together. I don't want to see you just in the lodge. If I'm seeing you just in the lodge at our once a month stated meeting, then I'm a bad brother. And so making sure everybody fit into the pieces where they should be and where their strengths were and their passions were, to make the entire lodge operate and move.
This is always something that, well, it strikes me about Nevada. It strikes me about some of these more sparsely populated states. It's very similar to Northern Ontario. The challenges associated with visitation, which is really something, at least for my Masonic journey, I never considered, because there are 7 lodges that meet in my Masonic Temple different nights of the week. But then, the closest lodge is probably Essex, which is 20 minutes away, maybe 30 minutes, depending, Leamington. Then you've got Detroit right across the river. So depending on how the tunnel is, you can be there in 20 minutes. You've got Dearborn, the 4-hour stretch between Windsor and Toronto, you've got lodges in Chatham, you've got lodges in London, Sarnia, Toronto, as compared to Nevada, where, from what I could tell, like Elko was an island unto itself, basically, right? It's 4 hours either way to the next lodge, which is much more, I think, like Northern Ontario or some of these northern areas. As a master, didn't come up actually as much for you during your year just due to COVID, but in general, as a Nevada Mason, what is it like? What is the travel like, especially from what you've seen from a Grand Lodge perspective, getting to these different places and the travel that goes into it? It seems like it would be much more of a challenge in itself as opposed to some other areas.
It can be. The drive from Reno to Elko is 4 hours, and in the between here and there is Fernley. We have a lodge there. Lovelock, we have a lodge there. In fact, the now past Grand Master is the mayor of Lovelock, Nevada, famous for being the home of O.J. Simpson for a little bit, where he was imprisoned. After that is Winnemucca. We have a lodge there. After Winnemucca is, Battle Mountain, and I want to say we have a lodge there. And then Elko. And so it's what we call the 80 stretch, and that's the highway from it goes from San Francisco to Chicago. And along there, we have a lodge in almost every town or city. And so we all get together. Everybody comes into Reno, or everybody goes down to Las Vegas. And I talk to the brothers, at least in Vegas, frequently. That's 8 hours away. I was talking to one of them this morning, actually. And so we have a pretty good relationship across the state. And so that travel becomes easier, especially because we'll travel together if it's for Grand Master's visit to Winnemucca, for example. And so it's really not terrible. Nevada's a big state, but it can be nice to travel across it with brothers. It can be fun.
Well, and that travel element, it's one of the things I always suggest to newer Masons, even before they're a Mason. But if I know the benefits of traveling, it makes such a difference for a Masonic career and what you get out of the craft to travel and visit as regularly as possible. It seems like when you're not doing that, you're just missing out on one of the most fundamental and important parts of the craft, not only to strengthen the craft, but just for your Masonic journey. And you're not going to have as much fun if you're not traveling to other lodges, I think.
I agree. And something I like to tell people, especially people coming into Masonry, is we have different lodges, but there's no rivalry. This isn't like another organization where you're in a college fraternity and you have a rivalry with your same fraternity at another school or whatever it is, right? No, for us, it's you join the lodge because that's the night that works for you, but we're all brothers and we do things together. There's no rivalry. We all do things together. We all do Masonry, right? When we want to do softball, it's not Reno Lodge 13 that I want to have the softball team. It's Reno Masons that I want to have the softball team. We have 4 or 5 lodges here in Reno itself, and we have Carson City 20 minutes away, and we do things together. It's about the entire brotherhood for us.
And what about, because Reno seemed, if I recall from my train ride from San Francisco to Elko, the first leg before I went on to Chicago, I feel like Reno was pretty close to the California border, if I recall. Any visitation with either San Francisco, Grand Lodges there, or just lodges in the California area?
Yeah, actually, during our Grand Lodge, typically some of the Grand Lodge officers from California will come over, but a lot of them come from neighboring cities or counties very close to us because of how close we are to California. So, for example, Nevada City has a Grand Lodge officer. Nevada City is an hour away from here. And so we have a really good relationship with them. And so we see them semi-frequently. And we'll do things together when we can and it makes sense. And we try to do as much as we can together because, again, it's not just about our lodge or our Grand Lodge. It's about Masons as a whole, Freemasonry as a whole, and how we as Freemasons make our communities better and have a better brotherhood.
And that brotherhood, making the community better, making men better, making communities better. I think it really goes back to this idea of relevancy, right, within your community. How relevant is your lodge to the community around it? And I think going way back to the start of this interview, right, you talked about that a little bit in terms of, your original Masonic building was the oldest building in Elko. It had to be torn down, but now it sounds like, but even now where you're located, it sounds like it's a very relevant and important building, oldest building in Reno. It sounds like it's a very important building for Reno. I mean, what type of, and this could be for your lodge, for Reno Lodge, or more for the state, what type of efforts are being made to either make or just even demonstrate how relevant Freemasonry is to the communities in which it's located in Nevada? That's
a great question. So our building is across the street from City Hall here. That's very visible. And we like that. We rent out space to other businesses. We have a theater that we rent out to another. It's called the Burka Theater. They're an entire business. They put on performances. We have other small businesses that we want to rent out space to because we want them to be in our building because we want to be good community members and community partners. But beyond that too, our state legislature, there's a portrait in it of George Washington in a Masonic apron. That portrait came from Washington Alexandria Lodge in DC, which was George Washington's lodge. It's a lithograph, and it was a gift from the Grand Master. His name is David J. Morgan. He's a member of my lodge. He was Grand Master when he gifted it to the state of Nevada, and it hangs in our legislature. And when we celebrated our sequicentennial, our 150th anniversary as a state, we did a reenactment of the cornerstone laying from the Grand Lodge at our legislature and our Capitol building. And so Freemasonry in Nevada, and I mentioned this as well, the now past Grand Master of Masons in Nevada is the mayor of Lovelock, Nevada. And so he's political, he's active politically is what I should say. And he's a community leader. I mean, that's something that we strive for. It's not because we want positions of power, but it's because we want to give back and we want to do what's best for our state, our communities. And we want to be visible. Every parade, every single parade, for example, Nevada Day is October 31st every year. That's the day Nevada became a state. We have a parade. Carson Lodge 1, which Mark Twain was a member of, does a pancake feed on Nevada Day, right on the parade route. So people come from the community and they just have pancakes. And it's our way of opening our doors to the community and showing them that, one, we're here, and two, we invite you to come and check us out. Just learn more. Everybody, women, men, children, come and learn, ask questions, have pancakes, right? And so being active in the community, being active in our state is vital to us. And so we do everything we can to do so, to be relevant to our communities, to give back. We don't always want to take the credit, but we want to be good participants and community stewards.
Pancakes never hurt anything either.
No, never.
That's a pretty good way to get some goodwill. This podcast, kind of switching topics a little bit, but this podcast was kind of formed, or this interview, I should say, this connection was made through a family member, through Brother Carp in Los Angeles. But he did, and you did mention earlier, right? You've got a pretty significant family history within Freemasonry. So, what is that like? I've got the same thing. I've got a pretty strong family connection, but I didn't join in my dad's lodge or my grandfather's lodge. I joined in a lodge when I was in school and stuck around ever since, but just from your perspective, what's it like to be a Mason and have that Masonic background? Do you think that makes you look at the craft differently than, say, somebody coming in who has no family connections to it? Does it kind of impact the way you try to be a worshipful master? What's that been like for you in terms of how it's affected your Masonic career, or just your view of the craft, both even before you were a Mason, seeing it from the outside kind of, and now that you're, as in it as you can be at this point?
I will say this. One of my biggest regrets as being master was that my uncle couldn't be there for my installation. He was there when I was raised with my father. My dad was at the installation because he's a member of my lodge now. He moved up here to Reno. And my father-in-law, I actually brought my father-in-law into Masonry. And I made him my chaplain for my year because I found that to be incredibly special. But I would say my Masonic journey itself I wouldn't say my family has had an impact on my Masonic journey as a Mason. I'm very sentimental with having my family history with it. And that is one thing that really bummed me out, was that my uncle couldn't be there, because neither of my grandfathers could be there because they had passed already. And knowing that I was always going to be a Mason because of that family history. And for me, it was, I was raised with my grandfather's gavel, his setting mall gavel that was given to him when he was master of his lodge, Cassia Lodge in, I think, Brooklyn, New York. And it was like it's a solid steel gavel that was used for my raising, but it was also the gavel used when I was installed as master, and that's very special. But as I mentioned on the converse side of that is I think that my Masonic journey itself has been very self-fulfilling and self-propelled in trying to be more involved and do more. It's been interesting because growing up with Masonry, I would always see my dad go to events, meetings, meeting brothers, and I don't think I ever appreciated it for what it was. But becoming a Mason and knowing that becoming a master of my lodge, I think made me appreciate it even more. One of the most important lessons in Masonry is at the end of the meeting, we meet on the level, right? We meet together as brothers. The master of the lodge is the master of the lodge, but at the end, we're all on the level. We're brothers. And I think that's always an important lesson. And I preach that and I stress it to every brother coming in, especially every brother that goes into the line, that they understand at the end of the day, I might have the title of past master and worshipful, but I'm still just a brother. So I have my past master's apron and I very rarely wear it. I prefer wearing the regular white apron because it's the symbol of, in my mind, equality in the lodge. And I think that's something that is a lesson I took from my uncle and my father about Masonry, is that at the end of the day, we're all equals within the eyes of the lodge. We will put down our tools at the end of the day at some point, and our brothers will come to pick that up for us and comfort our families and one another. And I have seen former Grand Masters go out of their way to help a brother's family who has put down their working tools for good. And he doesn't talk about being that past Grand Master. He's just a brother. And I think that going through this process of being a Mason and going through the line and being in leadership, both in the Blue Lodge and in Scottish Rite, has taught me that valuable lesson. And I think that knowing my uncle and the kind of person he is, and my father and the kind of man he is, helps propel that. And I don't know if that was a full answer to your question, but it's kind of been the philosophy I've always had with Masonry, especially since I came into Masonry. There's people that come in and they think, oh, great, national treasure, right? That's what they know about Masonry, but that's not what we do. At the end of the day, we're there to treat brothers as equals and make good men better men, and to give back to our communities and comfort our families and the widows and the orphans. And those that I think that we often find those that come in for the wrong reason find their way out very quickly. And I think that Masonry has this unique way of teaching these lessons, that you could be a Mason with a lot of history, a lot of family history, and a lot of ties to it. We have a relative that's, I think, was a Grand Lodge officer in New York, right? And that's not relevant in the lodge because we're all equal. And it has this unique way of having, like I was saying, family ties and extensive Masonic history, and those that have none, and bringing those together at the end of the day. And everybody has that unique journey and that unique path, and teaching those same lessons of equality and the reverence for God, for mankind, for doing what's right and doing good.
There's always, I think, that level of tension in Freemasonry with what you described, the tension between leadership and the idea of, equality amongst the brethren. I mean, that comes up in our general charge, which I'm learning right now for installation, or relearning to get ready for it. How do you did touch on it, but to delve into that point a little bit more, how did you strike that balance between being a leader and also recognizing that the natural equality that Freemasonry is meant to display, meant to promote, right? Because there's that challenge of, and we're seeing it, I think, in Ontario a lot, and in other places where it's like every Mason has their own idea about, we talked about this earlier, right? Every Mason has their own idea about what's best for lodge. Sometimes there has to be a decision made, and you're not going to make everybody happy within that, right? And that's when kind of a leader needs to step up and try to direct things appropriately, so you don't end up with hurt feelings, all the rest of it. But just that tension, I think I'm noticing it more and more between the idea of everybody in the lodge, wants to view themselves as equal to everybody else, but you also have to have people making decisions sometimes, some of which may be unpopular, and that even goes up to the Grand Lodge level, right? The Grand Master is not always going to make the most popular decision, but it may be necessary depending on the circumstances. So how do you be a strong leader while maintaining this idea of equality, whether it be at the Grand Lodge level or in the lodge level?
When I was master, spoke with my past masters and my predecessors almost daily, asking for that advice. What do I do? There was an instance where one of our brothers wanted to do softball, and that seems harmless, right? But the problem that I was facing was that we didn't have enough people to fill a softball team, and the people that wanted to play weren't brothers or even prospective members, and I didn't see them as good portrayals of Masonry. And I wasn't going to allow somebody to wear a square and compass, one that they're not even allowed to wear as a non-member, but in a light that wasn't going to be portrayed positively for the lodge, or not just our lodge, but every lodge in Nevada, right? What we do reflects on our brothers in other lodges. And I had made the decision that we would not do that. We would not have softball unless it was a family-friendly event, something that we would be proud of having. And people would see us and they would be proud to see us. We would be proud to show off. And there was a lot of tension about that. And I got a very nasty text from a brother who that's all he wanted to do. And I wasn't willing to risk the reputation of not just our lodge, but every lodge in our region, in our state, with something that I viewed as being potentially harmful. And that caused a lot of anxiety for some. But at the end of the day, it was the right thing in my mind. And I know today it was the right decision to make, because it's, again, when we put on that square and compass, we're not representing just ourselves. We're representing our brothers. And we have to take a step back and remember who we're there to lead and why we're there to lead. Being the master of a lodge gives you immense responsibility and capability, right? But we have to remember that the lessons that we're taught to get to that point are about how we use those capabilities for the betterment of the lodge and the brothers and humanity. And so everything I did was, again, within the eyes of, at the end of the day, we'll all be on the level. And yes, I have to make an executive decision at times, but I'm going to try to empower others to help make that decision. That's the right decision that I know I'm already going to make, but lead them there. So that way the lodge coalesces together and we have an understanding of why we got there and what it was that we were doing.
Yeah, but that brings up a whole other set of interesting ideas. The biggest one, and I'm sure this is going to become more of a tension in the years to come, if not already is, right, is that tension between the personal and the Masonic, and when the two collide, when they don't, right? The idea of wearing square and compasses, wearing square and compass, and that then is reflective back on the craft as a whole. To what extent do you think that idea can become stifling? I think is stifling to Freemasonry. In the there's that famous plaque up at the Facebook office, right? Move fast and break things. You always have in any organization. I really like this analogy, which I heard once, right? And we'll talk about Freemasonry as an entire organization, even though obviously state by state there's great variation, province by province there's variation. Nonetheless, sooner or later you have an organization that's going to reach a point of being ordered, right? There's rules. So it starts off in a relative state of chaos. Every organization, maybe go back to 1716, whatever date you want. It's 1717. There's chaos. It's getting started. It's trying to figure out what it's doing. It reaches a point where it's kind of figured out what works well for it. Mm-hmm. But that can also become very, very stifling, because then the bureaucracy of the organization becomes very hesitant to try something new or something different. Maybe they're slow to embrace social media, they're slow to embrace whatever it is they're slow to embrace. And then you tend to have people who want to kind of push the boundaries of it and push things further. And you have, using this podcast as an example, right? It's a Masonic podcast. It discusses areas which are of Masonic interest, or I hope anyways, Masons find it of interest, but it's not, and right, there's the statement right on every description, right? We don't speak for any particular Grand Lodge. We don't speak for Freemasons. We are our own opinions about Freemasonry and the guest opinions about Freemasonry. How do you, what is the way that a lodge or even a Grand Lodge can both empower individual Masons to take risks, to try different things, to push boundaries, while also making sure that they're not doing so in a way that pushes it so far, suddenly, it pushes back negatively on the craft? Because an individual may be able to move fast and break things, especially, especially if you're a new company, you're a startup, the Silicon Valley approach, right? Move fast and break things. But when you're an organization that has as many members and as much of a history as Freemasonry, moving fast and breaking things at an institutional level can be a lot more dangerous. So where's that how do you, I guess, move fast and break things while also moving slowly and doing things right? Where do you find that happy middle ground?
I think that's part of that is the empowerment from the lodge itself. Something that was big for me was trying to empower brothers to bring ideas forward, start new committees. What would we do for fellowship? Like I would give a charge saying, I want to do this. Who wants to lead that? Right? As the master of the lodge, this was my goal. But I also think that in Nevada, we're in a unique position where the Grand Master goes to every lodge in the entire state during his tenure. He will travel to every single one, and he brings his message with him. And there was one message that stuck with me from a past Grand Master from Carson 1. And that was, we're not to be stuck in the four walls of our building. We are here as Masons, and the ritual is important. I brought this up a little earlier, but we're also here to break out of these walls and do new things as brothers and and be active. So our charge from the Grand Master and the Grand Lodge at the time was try new things, do other things. We got a new website in that time. We went more digital, trying to be more attractive to others. And I think there's a very fine line, because obviously you're going to have people that have been in Masonry a very long time and they don't want to change. And I get it. I came into their lodge, but they brought me in knowing, and they voted for me unanimously, knowing that we would come with other ideas as well. And we have to respect one another's boundaries on those. And the master of the lodge also has to understand when there is that give and take. How do we do both? And I think that there is a way. This is like a Venn diagram. There's going to be overlap, and we just have to find that overlap and do everything that we can to keep the harmony within the institution and the craft.
And the harmony is the key thing, right? Because going completely outside of Masonic, kind of pitching your own tent, not so much, obviously, you can't create your own lodge or whatever it is, that some clandestine group, right? But something like a podcast, creating kind of your own thing to promote Freemasonry, which kind of exists outside of the jurisdiction. I mean, there are benefits to it as well as one of the benefits is you can try things, and if it doesn't work, the Grand Lodge doesn't end up owning it the way they do if it's their initiative. I did an interview with, I can't think of the brother's name now, I'll put a link to it, brothers from Romania, and they have started Ether Lodge, which is basically Masonic NFTs, non-fungible tokens. It's kind of engaged in the crypto world. And I really like what they said, which is, we are purposefully, they're all Masons, but this activity, is not meant to be associated in any way with any Grand Lodge or our lodges. It's us doing it. We're not sharing any secrets or sharing any Masonic secrets, but it's us trying to take Freemasonry into the world of NFTs, into this world. And he said, the reason we want it to be not associated with our Grand Lodge or any Grand Lodge is because if it doesn't work and it fails, we'll own it. The Grand Lodge won't, right? And I think the benefit of it, it gives you more freedom to try things that may not work, because the Grand Lodge has to worry about if it fails, it will reflect badly on the Grand Lodge versus it, reflect badly on the individual. The downside is obviously, if everybody does it, you end up having kind of a hodgepodge of things happening, and it seems like the Grand Lodge has no control. So it's one of those things. It's just that it's a really interesting, because I'm seeing that fight happening in jurisdictions where, for example, with social media, Grand Lodges want control over what people are posting about Freemasonry, about their Masonic journey on social media, for good reason, because they don't want somebody posting, something crazy. But at the same time, the membership is saying, like, you can't control what we post. We have the right to post what we want. And that, I think that is an area where I see challenges coming in the future.
Yeah, and I think it's important that Masons understand their code from their Grand Lodge and their jurisdiction, right? Before I could be installed as master, I had to know the code, and the code is very long. And I also have to understand what the Grand Master's edicts are as they come out, and I work with them. And we've never had an issue that would conflict with the code and something like this. In fact, I bet that the past Grand Master in Nevada would be interested in this, because it's about engaging Masons and Masonry and helping Masons connect. We're not violating anything within the code. We're not talking about secrets. We're talking in broad terms, right? We know our lessons, and I can speak broadly about that, and brothers will understand that and what I'm saying, right?
Oh no, I agree completely, and on this one in particular. But it's more that general
100%.
kind of, So, for example, if I ever were to have, and I'd be happy to have, say, or I've had in the past, right, guests who are not, they're members of bodies that aren't recognized by our Grand Lodge, right? Stuff like that, and that's just a general idea. It's not specific to this podcast, because there's podcasts everywhere about Freemasonry, and they're all great. I mean, check out the Round Table is a great one. Check out First Three Knocks is really good. I like them all. Winding Stairs, Juan down in Florida. They're all excellent podcasts. It's just that challenge of how far do the individual members get to push and get to set out their own tent and do their own thing Masonically, kind of outside, before Grand Lodges start to try to rein them back in. And then that tension is really interesting. I just see that as a really interesting challenge coming up, and not just for Freemasonry. When I worked in government, near the end of my time there, people, we had things coming out, directives about what you could or could not post on social media. And then employees were like, well, hold on, this government can't tell me what to post on social media. It's just a really interesting, even societal thing, conflict between what individuals can and can't do within their personal life. At what point does that start to affect other areas of their life, and do those areas push back? I just think I think it's going to come up more and more in the coming coming years.
I agree. And I think that change is good as long as we remember to remain within our code.
I mean, there's that old right, Festina Lent, make haste slowly, which is always a good idea. You know, how much have you, this is something I've never really asked before. And I don't know if I've ever actually had an immediate past master on during his term as IPM. How much do you struggle, or do you struggle at all? You talked about, it's the master show. How much are you enjoying being in the IPM's chair? Do you struggle? Do you want to jump back in? Do you feel there's times when you want to grab the gavel? Like, what's it like to be an immediate past master? Because I know for myself, it's hard. It was hard. You spend the year. I was twice in a row, actually. So you spend the 2 years as kind of the guy that everybody looks to kind of facilitate a meeting, and next thing you know, you're the has-been. What's that been like for you?
Amazing. It's been a lot of fun watching my now worshipful master, who was my senior warden, have the year that he has and be successful. And part of that for me was, I look at my year as master was not about me necessarily, but setting up the next master for success and so on. For me, there's never been a desire to grab the gavel or run the meeting. I'm there to assist where the master needs me. And it goes back to the lesson about meeting on the level and everybody being on the level, right? I knew it, my term would end. My time in the line would end. And I think that every Mason should look forward to that, because we look forward to the success of the lodge. And if we can get to that next master, that means that we're still there, right? That means we've been successful. We haven't gone away, and we're still accomplishing our goals and our missions. For me, it's been probably my favorite year of Masonry has been being the past master. And it's not because I don't have any responsibility as master. It's because I'm looking at those that came after me be successful. Again, my senior warden, our now worshipful master, I think that his success is my greatest success for the lodge.
And I think that is a good place to end it, because I think that's a perfect summary of what the goal of every master should be, right? Which is to make yourself irrelevant, right? If you're not making sure the people coming behind you are strong enough to take over the spot and are able to carry on, if the lodge becomes so dependent on one person, a master, whomever it is, that, he's necessary for the lodge to function, then something's gone wrong. Because every brother, it's a weird way to put it, but every brother should be expendable, in the sense that they should be they should have confidence that if they get hit by a bus tomorrow, knock on wood, that the lodge will be able to continue functioning. And it sounds like, that's a great way to put it. It sounds like you took the time to make sure your senior warden was prepared, and you've done that, and that's a really good thing, right? No one person should be more important than the lodge as a whole.
Well, and to cap that off, and it goes back to what I was saying earlier, is like, I have a past master's apron. I have a beautiful past master's apron, but I don't wear it. I wear the white one that every other brother wears, because I want to be on the same level as them at the end of my term. And that's what I wanted. I don't wear my past master's ring. When I go to lodge, I wear just a square and compass, because it reminds me of the lessons that I came into the lodge to learn. And it goes back to that, is at the end of the day, I was the master, but it wasn't about me being master. It was about doing what was best for the lodge and making sure that we all